He put me on speakerphone so his buddies could laugh at the punchline of our marriage. While they cackled about finalizing the divorce, a notification flashed on my screen for a massive commercial debt I never signed for. I touched the cold metal of the black card hidden in my wallet, the one I had not touched in 14 years. He thought he was discarding a boring wife, but he just unlocked the evidence that would bury him. My name is Harper Lockwood, and at 32 years old, I had perfected the art of being unnoticeable. I was sitting in my compact apartment in Ravensford, Pennsylvania, the kind of place that smelled of old radiator heat and lemon polish, when my phone vibrated against the coffee table. The screen lit up with the name Evan Carver. I stared at it for a moment, the silence of the room pressing against my ears, before I slid my thumb across the glass to answer. The first thing I heard was not his voice, but the hollow, echoing sound of a room full of people. He had put me on speakerphone. "Harper," Evan said, his voice loud and distorted, carrying the distinct bravado of a man performing for an audience. "I just wanted to let you know. I'm finalizing the divorce." A roar of laughter erupted in the background. It was a sharp, jagged sound, the collective guffaw of men who had been drinking expensive scotch and patting each other on the back for hours. I could hear the clink of glass against glass and the murmur of low voices. "Don't be too hard on her." "Evan," one of the voices sneered, close enough to the microphone to be heard clearly. "She's probably organizing her spice rack alphabetically right now. You know how she gets about." "Compliance?" More laughter followed. They were mocking my profession, my personality, my very existence. To them, I was just the boring wife, the paper checker, the woman who read the terms and conditions while they lived life in the fast lane. Evan did not silence them. In fact, I could hear the smirk in his silence. He wanted me to hear this. He wanted me to feel small. I did not cry. I did not scream. I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in the center of my chest, a sensation I was intimately familiar with. I waited for the laughter to subside, just enough for my voice to cut through the static. "Evan," I said, my tone flat and devoid of the hysteria he was likely hoping for, "did you put me on speaker to witness this, or to bury yourself?" The laughter on the other end faltered slightly, replaced by a confused murmur. But before Evan could respond, a notification banner slid down the top of my laptop screen, which was open in front of me. It was an alert from my bank. "Address change request processed 4179 Quarry Loop." I froze. I had never heard of Quarry Loop. My fingers flew across the keyboard, instinct taking over. I logged into my credit monitoring service, the one I kept active as a matter of professional habit. The dashboard loaded and a red flag appeared immediately. There was a new inquiry. A commercial guarantee had been executed in my name. I stared at the number. $485,000. The air left the room. This was not just a divorce. This was not just a public humiliation to entertain his wealthy friends during the holiday season. This was a debt transfer. Evan was dumping a massive toxic liability onto me before severing the legal ties. He was setting me up to be the fall guy for nearly $500,000 of commercial debt. "Harper, you still there?" Evan asked, his voice booming again, unaware that the dynamic of the conversation had shifted entirely. "Cat got your tongue. Enjoy your night." "Evan," I said softly, "I really mean that." I ended the call. Immediately, I opened the recording app on my phone. Because I worked in compliance, because I spent my days hunting for errors in other people's lies. I had set my phone to automatically record all incoming calls months ago. The file was there, saved. I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed the date. Then I typed the time, 8:45 in the evening. I began to construct a timeline, logging the call, the background noise, the specific insults, and the simultaneous arrival of the bank notification. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached into my purse, bypassing the debit card with the low balance and the grocery store loyalty cards. My fingers brushed against a cold, heavy rectangle tucked into the deepest slit of the wallet. I pulled it out. It was made of matte black metal, heavy and unyielding. The letters embossed on the front did not shine. They absorbed the light. Lockwood Stewardship. I ran my thumb over the raised lettering. I had carried this card for 14 years, ever since the day I left the cabin in the woods. I remembered the voice of the woman who gave it to me, her warnings sharp and clear in my memory. "Don't use it to buy things," she had told me, her eyes boring into mine. "Use it to buy the truth. Use it only when the illusion breaks." I looked at the credit report on my screen, the debt that was meant to crush me, and then down at the card in my hand. The illusion was not just broken, it had been shattered, and Evan Carver had no idea that by trying to bury me under his debt, he had just forced me to pick up the shovel. The last 30 days had been a performance, a perfectly choreographed dance of deception that I was only now beginning to understand. Evan had suddenly become the model husband. He brought me coffee in bed, dark roast with just enough cream, and left vases of expensive white lilies on the dining table. He kept talking about fresh starts and building a legacy together, phrases that sounded romantic but now tasted like ash in my mouth. I should have known that when a man like Evan starts talking about legacies, he is usually looking for someone to underwrite the cost. Then came the call from my mother-in-law, Vivian Carver. Her voice was always smooth, polished like a stone found in a river, but cold to the touch. "Harper, darling," she had said, her tone leaving no room for refusal. "We are having a private family dinner at the Hawthorne Room. Just us. We have some partners in town, and we must maintain the image of a united front." She made it sound like a duty to the crown. I agreed, of course. I always agreed. That was my role, the compliant wife, the background noise. But compliance was not just my personality, it was my profession. I worked at the Gray Line Compliance Office. While Evan and his friends joked that I checked paper for a living, the reality was far more clinical. I spent my days dissecting the anatomy of corporate lies. I reviewed contracts for hidden clauses, traced server logs to identify unauthorized access, and followed digital footprints that people thought they had washed away. The first crack in Evan's facade appeared a week ago. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 2:07 in the morning. It was a single notification, one-time passcode for policy access 8943. I sat up, blinking in the dark room. Evan rolled over, his voice thick with sleep but his eyes far too alert for the hour. "Just a system glitch. Babe," he mumbled, reaching out to touch my arm. "Ignore it. The bank's server is probably resetting." I went back to sleep, or pretended to. But the auditor in me was awake. 2 days later, at my desk at Gray Line, a file triggered a conflict of interest flag on my monitor. It was a commercial lease agreement for a massive warehouse facility under Carver Freight Works. The family company. I opened the digital document, scrolling past 40 pages of legal jargon until I reached the signature line. There it was, my name, my digital signature. It looked perfect. It was a precise replica of the signature I used for internal approvals. But beneath the surface, the metadata told a different story. The timestamp on the signature was October 14th at 3:15 in the afternoon. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. On October 14th, Evan had insisted I needed a mental health day. He had booked me a 4-hour treatment at a sanctuary spa where phones were confiscated at the reception desk. I was lying on a massage table with cucumbers on my eyes at the exact moment I was allegedly signing a 10-year commercial lease for a warehouse that cost $20,000 a month. I did not confront him. I did not storm home and demand answers. That is what a hurt wife does. I was an auditor. I exported the metadata. I captured the access logs showing the signature originated from an IP address that did not match my office or my personal devices. I zipped the files and sent them to an encrypted Proton Mail account I had created years ago, one that Evan did not know existed. That evening, I came home to find Evan in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a rhythmic, aggressive cadence. He wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter, studying me with a gaze that felt like a physical search. "Harper," he said, his voice casual, too casual. "Do you know exactly what's in your wallet right now? Like, everything." My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained blank. He was fishing. He wanted to know if I had found the black card, or perhaps he was checking to see if I noticed any new credit lines appearing on my report. He needed to know if the mouse realized the cheese was poisoned. I looked up from my book and gave a small, oblivious laugh. "Just receipts and expired coupons." "Evan," I said, "why do you need cash? I think I have $20. He smiled, and the tension left his shoulders. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was safe. "No, babe," he said, turning back to the cutting board. "Just checking. You lose things sometimes." I went back to pretending to read, my mind sharpening like a blade. He had no idea that the trap only works if the prey doesn't know it is being hunted. And I knew. The Hawthorne room was designed to make you feel underdressed, no matter what you were wearing. It was all dark mahogany, velvet drapes, and the low, murmuring hum of money being exchanged. The table my in-laws had reserved was in the center of the room, a stage lit by a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my father's entire lifetime earnings. Around the table sat the Carver clan Russell, looking like a bulldog in a three-piece suit, Vivian, whose smile was as tight as her facelift, and Evan, who sat next to me but miles away. But it was the others who unsettled me. Scattered around the periphery were three of Evan's fraternity buddies, men in their 30s who still acted like they were in a college locker room, and at the tables nearby, strangers in expensive tailoring watched us with curious, predatory eyes. They looked like an audience waiting for the curtain to rise. Russell cleared his throat, the sound commanding immediate silence. He swirled his scotch, the ice clinking against the glass. "You see," Russell began, his voice booming enough to carry to the neighboring tables. "In this family, we understand the difference between an asset and a liability. An asset grows. An asset contributes. A liability, well, a liability just drags the ship down." He stared directly at it as he said the word liability. Vivian tittered, bringing a manicured hand to her mouth. "Oh, Russell, don't be so technical. Harper tries her best. Although, I suppose her view of the world is limited." "What is it you do again, dear?" "You hunt for misplaced commas in contracts compliance," I said quietly. "I ensure legality." "Right," Vivian said, waving her hand dismissively. "You check for typos. It must be so small, living life in the margins." The table erupted in laughter. Evan did not defend me. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, looking at me with the detachment of a man watching a stranger get arrested. He was not my husband tonight. He was my escort to the guillotine. Then came the main event. Russell reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He did not hand it to me. He slid it across the white tablecloth with the back of his hand, like he was discarding a used napkin. "It is done," Russell said. "Evan signed these 14 days ago. We just waited for the right moment to present them. 14 days ago. 2 weeks. That meant the flowers, the coffee in bed, the talk of a fresh start. It was all a stall tactic while they positioned their financial artillery. I looked at the envelope, petition for dissolution of marriage. Suddenly, flashes of light erupted around the table. Evan's friends had their phones out. They were recording. This was not just a breakup, it was content. They were filming my humiliation for their group chat. Evan looked at the camera lens of his best friend's phone, flashed a winning smile, and repeated the line from his call earlier. "Like I said, Evan declared, his voice smooth and cruel. "I am finalizing the divorce." The laughter was raucous now, a jagged sound that tore through the polite atmosphere of the restaurant. They expected me to cry. They expected me to beg or scream or run out of the room in tears. Instead, I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. "I will not be staying for the main course," I said, my voice steady. "I would like to pay for my appetizer." Russell let out a bark of a laugh. "You pay in this place." "Darling, a glass of water here costs more than your hourly wage. Can you even afford to breathe the air in here?" "Put it on Evan's tab," one of the friends shouted. "Alimony starts now." I looked at Evan. He was smirking, enjoying the show. He thought I was powerless. He thought I was broke. He thought I was nothing but a compliance officer with a cheap suit and a broken heart. I opened my purse. My hand hovered over my debit card, the one linked to the joint account they had likely already drained. I paused. Use it only when the illusion breaks. The illusion was dust. My fingers bypassed the plastic and closed around the cold, heavy metal of the black card. I pulled it out. It absorbed the chandelier light, a matte black void against the pristine white tablecloth. I did not hand it to the waiter. I slapped it down on the table with a heavy, metallic clack that sounded like a gun being placed on a counter. The laughter at our table continued, but at the table directly to my right, the air suddenly vanished. A man I had never met, a man with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than a car, had been watching the scene with amusement. But when the black card hit the table, he froze. His eyes locked onto the matte metal surface, and the color drained from his face so fast it looked like he had seen a ghost. "Holy," he whispered, the word dying in his throat. He looked from the card up to my face, and the amusement was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated terror. The matty black card sat on the starch-white tablecloth like a hole in the universe. The man at the next table, the one in the charcoal suit, was staring at it with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. He was not looking at it like it was a platinum Amex or a black Centurion. He was looking at it like it was the launch code for a nuclear silo. He leaned over and whispered something to the older man beside him, a silver-haired figure who looked less like a dinner guest and more like a consigliere. The older man stopped mid-sip, his eyes snapping to the card, then to me. I looked down at the embossed text again. Lockwood Stewardship. The name felt strange on my tongue. A ghost from a life I had buried under contracts and compliance logs. I was not born a Lockwood. I was taken in by one, Mara Lockwood. She was not a mother in the traditional sense. She was a guardian of secrets who lived in a drafty cabin deep in the Pennsylvania woods. She did not bake cookies. She taught me how to read a double-entry ledger by the light of a kerosene lamp. She taught me that people lie, but math does not. I remembered the day I turned 18. Mara had pressed this exact piece of metal into my palm. It was cold then, just as it was cold now. "Harper," she had said, her voice raspy from decades of unfiltered cigarettes. "This is not money. Do not use it to buy things. Do not use it for a car or a dress or a house. Use it to buy the truth. Use it only when the world tries to sell you a lie you cannot afford. I had kept it hidden for 14 years, a heavy secret in the lining of my wallet, until tonight." The man in the charcoal suit stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a single, fluid motion and walked toward our table. He moved with a kind of dangerous grace, ignoring the laughter of Evan's friends, ignoring the waiters, ignoring the entire room. He stopped directly in front of me. He did not look at Evan. He did not look at Russell. He looked only at me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but carrying a weight that silenced the frat boys instantly. "Are you Harper Lockwood?" He did not call me Mrs. Carver. He used the name on the card. Evan bristled, sensing his spotlight was being stolen. He puffed out his chest, stepping between me and the stranger. "Hey, buddy," Evan sneered, his voice slurring slightly from the wine. "She's Harper Carver, and who the hell are—" Evan's eyes dropped to the card on the table. Greed, sudden and sharp, flashed across his face. He realized it wasn't a debit card. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it looked expensive. "Actually," Evan said, reaching out a hand to snatch the card. "I'll take that. Community property." "Right." His fingers were inches from the metal when the stranger moved. It was a small motion, barely a twitch, but suddenly the stranger's hand was wrapped around Evan's wrist. He didn't twist it. He didn't strike him. He just held Evan's arm in place with the immovable solidity of a steel beam. Evan tugged, confused, but his arm didn't budge. "Do not," the stranger said, his voice dropping an octave. "Touch the stewardship." He released Evan with a shove that sent my husband stumbling back into his chair. The stranger turned to a passing waiter. "Get the general manager," he commanded. "Tell him the stewardship key is on table 4. Tell him the protocol is active." The waiter's eyes went wide, and he sprinted toward the back office. At the head of the table, the color drained from Vivian's face. She looked like she was witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Her eyes were locked on the black card, wide with recognition and something else, panic. She leaned forward, her voice a hiss of pure venom directed at her son. "Evan," she whispered, her composure cracking for the first time in the 5 years I had known her. "Get it. Get the card. Now." A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Vivian knew. She knew exactly what this card was. And suddenly, the dinner, the humiliation, the forced divorce papers it all took on a sinister new shape. They hadn't brought me here just to embarrass me. They had brought me here to break me, hoping that in the wreckage, I would leave something behind. But I hadn't left it behind. I had put it on the table. The general manager appeared within 30 seconds. He did not look like a man who seated guests or recommended wine pairings. He wore a suit that cost more than my annual salary, and he carried himself with the rigid, alert posture of a crisis handler. He did not apologize for the commotion. He did not look at Evan, who was still rubbing his wrist, or at Vivian, who was now gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles were white. "Mrs. Lockwood," he said, his voice low and devoid of inflection. He did not use my married name. "Please come with me. We need to initiate the verification protocol. I'm coming with her," Noah said. It was not a request. The manager looked at Noah, then at the black card still resting on the table, and gave a sharp nod. "Understood. This way. This." I stood up, leaving my husband and his laughing friends in a stunned silence. I walked past Russell, who looked as if he had swallowed a lemon. We were led through the kitchen, past the frantic energy of the line cooks, to a heavy steel door at the back. The manager swiped a key card, and we stepped into a room that felt like a vault. It was completely soundproof. The noise of the kitchen vanished the moment the door sealed shut behind us. In the center of the room was a sleek glass table with a device that looked nothing like a credit card terminal. It was a biometric scanner with a small display screen. "Please place the stewardship key on the pad," the manager instructed. I placed the matte black card on the glass. The screen lit up instantly. It did not ask for a PIN. It did not ask for a zip code. Voice verification required. The screen read, Question 1. What lies beneath the 3rd floorboard of the east bedroom, I felt a shiver run through me. It was a question about Mara's cabin, a detail so specific no hacker could ever guess it. "A tin box of blue jay feathers," I said, my voice trembling slightly. The screen flashed green. Question 2. What was the rule of the winter solstice? Burn the ledger before the snow melts. I answered. Identity verified. The screen went dark, and a moment later, a large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The face of a woman appeared. She looked to be in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a background of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "Hello." "Harper," the woman said. "I am Arden Hale." I have been managing the Lockwood Legacy Trust since Mara passed away. We have been waiting for you to activate the key. I don't understand, I said, looking from the screen to Noah. What is this? Is there money on this card? It is not a debit card. Harper, Arden said gently. It is a master access key. The Lockwood Trust is not a bank account. It is a holding entity for conservation lands, historical archives, and commercial real estate assets across the tri-state area. Arden paused, glancing down at a file on her desk before looking back at me. For instance, she continued, the building you are currently standing in, the land, the Hawthorne Room is built on, and the lease the restaurant operates under, it all belongs to the trust. Technically speaking, you are their landlord. The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Evan and his family were outside, drinking wine and mocking me for being poor, for being a liability, while sitting in a restaurant that existed on my land. They were trying to publicly execute me in my own castle. I looked at Noah. He was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, watching me with an expression that was part admiration and part calculation. You knew, I said to him. I suspected. Noah admitted, I'm Noah Creed. My father runs Creed Logistics. We've been trying to negotiate a right-of-way through a massive tract of forest in western Pennsylvania for 3 years. Every time we tried to find the owner, we hit a wall called the Lockwood Trust. We couldn't find the signatory. We couldn't find the key holder. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. I didn't sit next to you by accident, Harper. I tracked the trust's dormant signals to this city, but I didn't know it was you until you put that card on the table. I looked back at the screen, at Arden Hale, and then down at my hands. The pieces of the last month clicked together with the violent precision of a bear trap. The sudden kindness from Evan, the mother-in-law's dinner, the debt transfer. They knew. I whispered. Vivian knew. They found out. Arden confirmed. We detected unauthorized queries into the trust's blind spots about 6 months ago. Someone was digging. They realized the trust had no active leader, just a dormant beneficiary. They didn't want you to know you were rich, Harper. They wanted to divorce you, saddle you with debt so you would be desperate, and then trick you into signing over your rights to the trust as part of a settlement before you even knew what those rights were. I felt a cold rage settle over me, replacing the shock. It was the same coldness I felt when I found a discrepancy in a compliance log. It was the clarity of the auditor. I wasn't given this, I said, my voice hardening. I was just asleep, and they tried to rob me before I woke up. Exactly, Noah said, a dark smile playing on his lips. So, the question is, now that you are awake, what are you going to do about the tenants outside? I asked the general manager to bring them in. It was a power move, reversing the dynamic of the entire evening. When the steel door opened, Russell, Vivian, and Evan spilled into the soundproof room, bringing their scent of expensive cologne and entitlement with them. Russell took one look at Noah standing beside me and bristled, his face flushing a deep, angry red. Get this man out of here. Russell barked at the manager. This is a private family matter, and you, he turned to me, his eyes narrowing. You are causing a scene. Harper, it is embarrassing. I am so worried about her, Vivian chimed in, though her eyes were darting around the room, assessing the biometric scanner and the secure monitor. She is clearly having an episode. Look at her. Russell. She is delusional. I am not delusional. Vivian, I said, my voice cool and steady. I am verified. Arden, on the screen. Arden Hale cleared her throat. Her voice was amplified, crisp, and authoritative, filling the small room. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Carver, Evan. I am Arden Hale, legal counsel for the Lockwood Legacy Trust. I am currently reviewing the prenuptial agreement you insisted Harper sign 5 years ago. Evan stepped forward, confusion warring with arrogance on his face. What does that have to do with anything we are divorcing? Her debt is her problem. Actually, Arden said, a dry smile touching her lips. Clause 7, Section B, clearly states that any assets, inheritances, or trusts acquired or revealed during the marriage remain the sole separate property of the beneficiary. You drafted that clause, Russell, to protect Evan's future inheritance from Harper. But ironically, it now hermetically seals the Lockwood Trust from all of you. Evan is entitled to exactly 0% of this portfolio. The silence that followed was heavy. Evan looked at the screen, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He did not see a wife anymore. He saw a bank vault he had accidentally locked himself out of. His demeanor changed instantly. The sneer vanished, replaced by a soft, pleading look that made my stomach turn. He reached for my hand, his fingers damp. Harper. "Baby," he said, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "This is crazy. We don't need lawyers. Look, we are a team. Right. We always have been. We can manage this. Together. Think of what we could build." I pulled my hand away as if he were radioactive. "You finalized the divorce an hour ago." "Evan." "Remember, he was just stressed," Vivian interjected, stepping between us. She saw that the legal route was blocked, so she immediately switched to the psychological one. This is all too much for her. Look at her eyes. She is being manipulated by this stranger. She pointed a shaking finger at Noah. Harper is mentally unstable. She has been for months. She cannot possibly manage a trust of this magnitude, as if on cue. The printer in the corner of the room whirred to life, spitting out a document with a red header. Arden's face on the screen grew grave. "Harper," Arden said, her voice tight. "We just received a flagged notification through the trust's automated background check. It is a dual alert." I walked over and picked up the paper. It was a summary of the commercial guarantee for the warehouse on Quarry Loop, the debt of nearly $500,000 standing in my name. But beneath it was something worse, a formal accusation from Grayline Compliance Office, my employer, alleging gross misconduct and theft of internal proprietary data. I looked up at Russell. He was smiling, a cold, shark-like expression. They had set this up perfectly. They knew about the trust, and they knew they couldn't touch the money legally. So they decided to destroy the person holding the keys. If I was buried in debt and facing criminal charges for data theft, the trust's morality clauses would kick in, I would be suspended, and a court-appointed conservator would step in. And who would apply to be that conservator? "You see," Russell said, spreading his hands. "You are in trouble, Harper. Serious trouble. $500,000 in debt. Corporate espionage charges. You will go to prison." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "But we can help. We can make the debt disappear. We can speak to the board at Grayline. We have friends there. All you have to do is sign the power of attorney. Let Evan handle the heavy lifting of the trust while you recover." It was blackmail, pure and simple. Sign over the fortune, or go to jail for crimes they framed me for. Noah stepped forward, his fists clenched, but I held up a hand to stop him. I did not need a knight. I was an auditor. I looked Russell dead in the eye. I did not shout. I did not cry. "You think you have me cornered," I said softly. "You think I will sign because I am scared. You think I am alone." I tapped the paper with the false accusations. "But you forgot what I do for a living, Russell. I don't just read contract. I track audit trails. You want me to sign because you think I am weak, but I have the one thing you are terrified of. I have the files. I did not go back to my apartment. My apartment was a liability. If Evan had people willing to falsify commercial leases in my name, he certainly had people willing to kick down a door or plant something in my living room." Noah drove us to the Sentinel, a high-security hotel owned by the Creed Family Corporation. He didn't ask questions. He just handed me a key card to a suite on the top floor and stood guard by the door while I turned the desk into a war room. I opened my laptop and cracked my knuckles. The emotional part of my brain wanted to scream, but the auditor part of my brain was already organizing the chaos into rows and columns. I created a new spreadsheet. Column A, timestamp. Column B, alleged action. Column C, IP address. Column D, alibi. Column E, third-party verification. I started pulling the raw data from the encrypted file I had sent myself earlier. The request for the $500,000 commercial guarantee had been digitally signed at 10:14 in the morning on a Tuesday. I cross-referenced the IP address. It originated from the internal server at Carver Freight Works. At that exact moment, my calendar confirmed I was in a mandatory compliance training seminar at Gray Line, sitting in a room with 30 witnesses and no electronics allowed. Next, the credit check. That request came from a residential IP address. I recognized the number immediately. It was our home Wi-Fi. The request was made while I was at work, but Evan was working from home that day. They were sloppy. They assumed I would never look at the metadata because I was just the paperwork girl. I picked up my phone and dialed the emergency line for Gray Line's Human Resources Department. It was late, but the crisis line was always manned. "This is Harper Lockwood. Employee ID 4922, I said, my voice steady. "I am formally initiating the Whistleblower Protection Protocol under Article 7 of the Corporate Handbook. I have evidence that my credentials were compromised and used to facilitate external fraud. I am placing myself on voluntary administrative leave, effective immediately to assist the internal investigation." The HR representative on the other end stammered, "Mrs. Lockwood, we received a report from legal about data theft. I am sending you the packet now." I interrupted. "It contains the server logs proving the access came from an outside IP address while I was verifiably offline. If you terminate me before reviewing this evidence, it will be considered retaliation under federal labor laws. Do you understand? Yes. I will flag this for the General Counsel immediately." I hung up. By declaring whistleblower status, I had frozen them. They couldn't fire me without inviting a lawsuit, and now they were legally obligated to audit the very evidence I just provided. I had just forced my own company to investigate Evan's crime for me. Noah walked over from the window, placing a glass of water on the desk. He looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. "You are terrifyingly good at this," he said quietly. "I hate bullies," I replied, typing in a new command. "Why do they need a warehouse?" "Noah, the Carvers aren't expanding. Their shipping volume has been down for 3 quarters. Noah sat on the edge of the sofa, his expression grim. "That is the rumor my father heard. Carver Freight Works is moving a lot of empty containers. We suspect they are washing money through charity galas and inflated logistics contracts. That warehouse lease isn't for storage. It is a paper asset to justify a massive movement of cash. If they pinned the lease on you and the company goes under, I take the fall for the fraud." I finished the sentence. "And the debt." I reached into my bag and pulled out the crumpled divorce papers Russell had thrown at me. I smoothed them out on the desk, ignoring the standard boilerplate text and flipping straight to the addendums. I scanned the fine print, the tiny font that most people skip, and there it was. Clause 42. The respondent hereby waives any and all claims to third-party stewardships, trusts, or hereditary estates discovered or undisclosed at the time of signing. It was specific. Too specific. You don't put a waiver for stewardships in a standard divorce decree unless you know exactly what you are looking for. I looked at the footer of the document. It wasn't drafted by the Carver family's usual high-end firm. It was stamped Blue Wren Legal Services. Blue Wren? I whispered. I pulled up a corporate registry search on my laptop. Blue Wren Legal Services. Registered agent. A P.O. Box in Delaware. I dug deeper, tracing the payment for the domain registration, paid for by a credit card ending in 4559. I checked my old bank statements. That was the last 4 digits of Vivian's personal shopping card. She drafted it, I said, looking up at Noah. Vivian created a shell company to draft the divorce papers so she could slip in a clause to steal the trust without their main lawyers knowing. She wanted to cut Evan out, too. Eventually, she wanted it all. I closed the laptop with a snap. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. "We have enough to defend you," Noah said. "No," I said, standing up and walking to the window to look out at the city lights. Defense is not enough. If I just defend myself, they walk away to try again. I need them to commit to the lie. I turned back to him. I am going to let them think they are winning. I want Vivian to stand in front of a judge and swear under oath that she has no knowledge of the trust. I want her to lie on the record. And then, I tapped the black card sitting on the desk. I am going to use her own signature to lock the cell door. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a notification from the Ravensford Insider, a local gossip blog that usually focused on high school football scandals and zoning board disputes. Today, however, the headline was bold, red, and featured a grainy photo of me leaving the restaurant with Noah. The gold-digging wife and her billionaire lover, the setup of the century. I scrolled through the article. It was a masterclass in character assassination. Anonymous sources claimed I was unstable, paranoid, and had been plotting to extort the Carver family for months. It painted Evan as the heartbroken, unsuspecting husband and me as a manipulative schemer who had seduced a billionaire heir to fund my delusional lifestyle. My phone pinged again. This time, it was an email from Evan. The subject line was simply, "Can we talk?" "Harper, please," the email read. "I don't want lawyers involved. I just want to sit down, just you and me, and figure this out. I still care about you. We can fix this." I looked at the timestamp, 8:14 in the morning. I switched tabs to the financial newswire. At exactly 8:10 in the morning, a speculative article had gone live estimating the dormant assets of the Lockwood Legacy Trust at over $200 million. Evan wasn't emailing his wife because he missed her. He was emailing the bank vault because he realized he had lost the combination. "Do not reply," Arden said. Her face was grim on the laptop screen propped up on the hotel desk. "The situation has escalated. Vivian just filed an ex parte motion for emergency conservatorship. She is claiming that you are suffering from a psychotic break and that Noah is an undue influence manipulating you to gain access to the trust." "Conservatorship?" I asked, my voice cold. "She wants to own me. She wants to silence you," Arden corrected. "And she has found a sympathetic ear. The hearing is assigned to Judge Holloway." I looked into his records. He and Russell Carver have been co-chairs of the chaotic Ravensford Charity Golf Tournament for 10 years. If Holloway grants the temporary order, they can freeze your assets and force you into a facility for evaluation. It could take months to undo. Noah paced the room, his jaw tight. "I can get my family's legal team here in an hour. We can bury Holloway in motions." "No," I said, standing up. "If we flood the room with high-priced lawyers, I look exactly like the gold digger they are painting me to be. I look like I am hiding." I walked over to the portable printer Noah had brought in. "We are going to court," I said, "but I am not going as an heiress. I am going as an auditor." I spent the next 2 hours turning the hotel suite into a forensic lab. I didn't want legal arguments. I wanted data. I requested large foam boards and printed my spreadsheets on 11 by 17 paper. I mapped out the timeline, the date of the warehouse lease, the IP address from the Carver offices, the metadata from the spa receipt proving I was physically incapable of signing that document. Then, my phone buzzed with a message from the Grayline IT security lead. "Harper, we finished the initial scan. The remote access to your credentials didn't just use a password. It required a physical 2-factor authentication token. The admin key—" I froze. My admin key was a small, gray fob attached to my keychain. I always kept it in my purse. I closed my eyes, rewinding my memory. 3 weeks ago. We were in the kitchen. I had left my purse on the counter while I went to change. When I came back, Evan was rummaging through it, just looking for some gum. babe," he had said, laughing nervously when I caught him. He hadn't been looking for gum. He had been copying the serial number from the back of my token, or perhaps he had swapped it for a clone. He stole my identity from my own kitchen, I said, the realization settling in my gut like a stone. He didn't just use my name. He physically breached my security. "That is a felony," Noah said quietly. "It is leverage," I corrected. I went to the closet and pulled out the suit I had worn to work the day before. It was a cheap, charcoal gray polyester blend. It was ill-fitting, boring, and utterly forgettable. It was the uniform of the invisible workforce, the people who check the boxes and file the reports. Noah looked at the suit and frowned. "Harper, you don't have to wear that. You can wear something empowering." I shook my head, buttoning the jacket. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a billionaire. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a bureaucrat. I looked like the person who denies your loan application because you missed a signature on page 4. "This is empowering," I said. "They want to paint a picture of a hysterical, unstable woman in a designer dress screaming for attention. I am going to give them a compliance officer with a clipboard." I turned to Noah, my eyes dry and sharp. "They laugh because they think I'm invisible." I said, "Tomorrow. They will wish I really was." The fluorescent lights in the hallway outside courtroom 4B hummed with a low, headache-inducing vibration. It was the perfect stage for the performance Vivian Carver was currently delivering. She sat on a wooden bench, clutching a lace handkerchief she had never owned before today, dabbing at dry eyes while her lawyer patted her shoulder. Evan sat beside her, head bowed, playing the role of the devastated husband whose wife had lost her mind. From where I stood near the water fountain, leaning against the wall in my drab gray suit, I could see the cracks in their acting. Vivian's eyes were not red. They were darting back and forth, scanning the hallway, checking the exits, checking me. I adjusted my stance, turning my ear slightly toward them. My hearing had always been sharp, another trait of a good auditor. As soon as the judge grants the temporary freeze, I heard Russell whisper to their attorney, his voice a low rumble. "We need 48 hours. Scrub the FreightWorks servers. If the trust is locked, she takes the fall for the data breach, and we claim the warehouse lease was her delusion." I felt a cold shiver, not of fear, but of anticipation. They were banking everything on this initial freeze. They needed to silence me legally so they could destroy the digital evidence of their fraud physically. Arden Hale stood beside me, looking like a statue in a black blazer. She leaned in close, her voice barely audible. "Do not play the ace yet. Harper," she instructed. "Do not show the waiver clause in the divorce papers. We need Vivian to establish a pattern of behavior first. We need her to admit she has been watching you. If she testifies that she has been monitoring your instability for months, she inadvertently validates that she had access to your life and your security tokens." I nodded once. It was a trap. We were going to let them think they were cornering me, only to realize they were walking onto a landmine. Noah stepped closer, his back to the Carvers, creating a shield of privacy. "I made a call," Noah murmured, his eyes fixed on Evan. "You remember the guy at the dinner last night? The one in the blue shirt who laughed the loudest when Evan put you on speaker, the one who made the joke about alimony. I asked." "He isn't a friend from college," Noah said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "He is an undercover forensic accountant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They have been building a case against Carver FreightWorks for 6 months. That speakerphone call, it wasn't just an insult. It was a recorded admission of intent to defraud in the presence of a federal officer." My grip on my briefcase tightened. The recording on my phone was no longer just a shield. It was a nail in a coffin that was already being built by the government. Suddenly, Evan stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket and walked toward us. He stopped 3 feet away, looking at me with sad, puppy dog eyes that masked the shark underneath. "Harper," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Please, look at us. We shouldn't be here. Just come home. Sign the power of attorney. Let me help you get better. If you just sign, everything will be okay." It was the classic abuser's promise. "Give up your power and I will stop hurting you." I looked at him, dissecting his expression. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the tremor in his hands. "I am fine." "Evan," I said, my voice flat. I have never been more lucid. Vivian appeared behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder like a claw. The worried mother act dropped for exactly 1 second, just long enough for me to see the predator beneath. "You are making a mistake, dear," Vivian said, her smile tight and devoid of warmth. "You are playing a game you cannot afford. Wealth requires a clean record, and yours is about to be very messy." She was threatening to ruin my name, my career, and my life to keep her stolen fortune. I did not respond. I simply looked down at my laptop bag. My fingers brushed the tab of the folder I had labeled Exhibit A. Inside, I had the lease, the forged digital signature, the IP logs, and the timeline. Lease, signature, IP, timeline, waiver. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open. A bailiff stepped out, looking bored. "Case number 497. He called out, "Carver versus Lockwood." I pushed off the wall. I did not look back at Noah or Arden. I walked toward the open doors with the rhythmic, steady click of my heels on the linoleum floor. I was not walking in there to ask a judge for mercy. I was not walking in there to tell a sob story. I was walking in to file a report on a severe compliance violation, and I was going to make sure the penalties were maximum. The courtroom air was stale, recycling the tension that had been building for the last hour. Vivian's lawyer stood before the bench, gesturing toward me with a pitying shake of his head. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Mrs. Lockwood is suffering from acute delusional episodes. She suddenly claims to control a massive fortune, yet she has spent her entire adult life checking typos for a salary that barely covers rent. She is easily manipulated. We are simply asking to freeze the trust assets and appoint her husband, Evan Carver, as her temporary conservator to protect her from predators." He pointed an accusatory finger at Noah, who sat silently in the back row. Evan took the stand next. He looked at the judge, his eyes wet with practiced tears. "I just want her safe." "Your Honor," Evan said, his voice cracking perfectly. "Harper. She doesn't understand high finance. She checks paperwork. That is it. She isn't equipped for this. She is making things up because she has heard about the divorce." The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Lockwood, do you have a statement?" I stood up. I did not smooth my cheap gray suit. I did not look at Evan. I walked to the podium and placed my laptop on the stand. "I do not have a statement, Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and devoid of tremor. "I have an audit." I nodded to Arden, who connected my screen to the courtroom displays. "Exhibit A," I announced. "This is a verified log from the Grayline compliance server. It shows my credentials were used to access sensitive financial data at 10:14 in the morning on October 14th. I clicked a button, and a second document appeared next to it. And this is a receipt from the Sanctuary Spa, showing I was checked in from 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, with my phone surrendered at the front desk. I was physically incapable of logging in. However, the IP address tracing the login leads directly to the internal network of Carver Freightworks. Vivian stiffened in her seat. "Exhibit B," I continued, the rhythm of my voice steady like a metronome. "A commercial lease for a warehouse, guaranteeing a debt of $485,000 in my name. The digital signature was applied at the exact same time my credentials were stolen. And here is the bank alert, sent to an address I have never lived at, attempting to hide the debt from me." "She is fabricating this," Vivian blurted out. unable to help herself. She is paranoid. I turned to her, my expression blank. Exhibit C, I said, pulling up the divorce petition. If I am paranoid... Vivian, why does Clause 42 of the divorce papers you drafted explicitly ask me to waive rights to any third-party stewardship or trust? The courtroom went silent. You knew, I said, looking at the judge. They knew I was the beneficiary of the Lockwood Legacy Trust before I did. They stole my identity to burden me with debt, then drafted a divorce agreement to steal the assets while I was distracted by the bankruptcy they engineered. Arden Hale stepped forward. And, Your Honor, I would like to draw the court's attention to the prenuptial agreement the Carver family insisted on 5 years ago. Specifically, the bad faith clause. It states that if either party attempts to defraud the other or commits forgery, they forfeit all claims to marital assets. Evan's face went white. He had signed his own death warrant 5 years ago. Finally, I said, pulling out my phone. They claim they are worried about my mental health. They claim they want to protect me. I plugged the phone into the audio jack. I'm finalizing the divorce. Evan's voice boomed through the speakers, followed by the raucous, cruel laughter of his friends. She's probably organizing her spice rack. Do it now. She will sign because she is too ashamed to fight. The laughter hung in the air, echoing off the wood paneling, sounding cruel and grotesque in the solemnity of the court. I unplugged the phone. That was the intent, Your Honor, I said. Not protection, humiliation, and theft. Judge Holloway looked at Russell Carver, his golf buddy, and then he looked at the mountains of undeniable data on the screen. He knew he could not bury this. The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. The judge ruled, slamming his gavel. I am issuing an immediate temporary restraining order against Evan and Vivian Carver. Furthermore, I am ordering a freeze on all assets related to Carver Freight Works to preserve evidence, and I am referring this file to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Pandemonium broke out. Russell was shouting at his lawyer. Vivian slumped back on the bench, looking old and defeated. Evan scrambled over the bar, rushing toward me, panic wild in his eyes. Harper. Wait, stop, he pleaded, reaching for my arm before a bailiff stepped in. I didn't. It was my mother. She made me do it. Harper, please, we can talk about this. I just wanted us to be free. I stopped and looked at him. I didn't feel love. I didn't feel hate. I just felt the satisfaction of a balanced ledger. You put me on speaker so they could laugh. Evan, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I kept the file so the court could listen. I turned my back on him and walked out of the double doors, past the stunned onlookers, past Noah, who gave me a silent nod of respect, and into the cool, clean air of the afternoon. The debt was gone. The fraud was exposed. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just checking the paper. I owned it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop your location in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more listeners.